All right, good morning, people. Guess what? Bob back once again, ready to break down some Bitcoin. Let's get right down to it. Weekly chart in front of us here. Man, that looks nice to start to the day. A nice little pop out of Bitcoin overnight. I got a few numbers we're tracking as far as kind of upside target for now. And we'll just kind of see how that goes. But realistically, I think we got some targets that may even come, and granted this, again, I think I said it yesterday, I doubt highly that we recover all these levels this week, but you never know. So I still think that there's some feasibility that, might even get something way up into here, and just kind of get a nice push. It'll probably sell off. I mean, if it even gets there, it's going to sell off for sure. But, again, you would look at the 21 simple as your kind of max target for now, because the likelihood that you immediately recover that is fairly slim. You kind of look back here over the course of recent history, and again, Bitcoin has only spent 2 weeks above the 21 simple moving average since it set this all-time high way back here. So the likelihood that it comes up and it recovers it immediately seems far-fetched. Let's be honest. Seems fairly unlikely that that's going to happen. So let's just go ahead and assume that's going to be our max move. You wick up above here. With any luck, we actually do close the week up here. Now, the interesting thing is if we get to something like that, then suddenly, and especially if we get a ton of volume that comes in this week, suddenly you're looking here, and this level right here, maybe down to 20,300, suddenly looks very, very attractive for a retest on a break of this. Then we can suddenly start to, potentially talk about recovering this level, holding it, and actually beginning our ascent up the chart. Now, these moving averages are still way far away, so I don't know how realistic that is to say that it's going to happen this week, and then next week we recover and hold this, and then all of a sudden we're off and running. But, there are a few things that would suggest that is certainly a feasibility. And all of a sudden, that bullish divergence we've been talking about on the weekly chart, finally we're moving back up towards this trend line again. After, we put in this lower low here, higher low on the RSI, finally it is curling itself back up. So, there are some aspects of this that actually look pretty attractive, right? You could look at this and say, all right, yeah. I mean, there's some things that we could start to talk about here. Now, is there still, potentially a move down here again? Sure. It's certainly feasible. We are in something of a falling wedge right here where we are starting to compress the price action. Before we were getting pops all the way up to 25,000. Then, you've only got a range from about 19.4 to 22.9. Now, all of a sudden, we're in a spot where the price range is constricted to about 19.2 to slightly over 20,000. Price compression leads to explosions eventually, and then it's just a matter as to which direction it's going to explode. This, assuming that this is a valid falling wedge through here, which it sure seems like it could be. I know there was one point where it maybe started to look a little bit like a descending triangle, but we break that, and all of a sudden it does look great as a falling wedge. You get a breakout, retest, and go. So right now, yeah, I mean, positive things to speak of. And again, we've got some general ideas, some upside targets. I wouldn't expect it to recover all the way up to here in this time period, but again, we some things we can look at there. But yeah, the weekly chart looks good for now. As long as we get consistent volume throughout the week and it doesn't just collapse on itself, I like what I see there. So again, positive there. Daily chart, same kind of idea. It's interesting on the RSI down here. So we've had this rounded bottom that we've been monitoring for a while now, and I do think that this came outside of the rounded bottom, on the RSI, and we talked about that yesterday, maybe day before, or no, yesterday, yeah. But now all of a sudden it essentially got what was the equivalent of a double bottom outside of the pattern. Now it's recovering back up into it. At that point, you can look at, again, we can look at this level, and we talked about this as well. This is the level that's been holding us back. Is Bitcoin necessarily ready to break through here on the daily chart? I'm not going to go and make that assessment at this point because I just don't know. You know, obviously, we remember what happened last time we came up here. And we spent, a little bit of time above it before just absolutely getting crushed back through it. But again, eventually we're going to come back and retest this trend line here. What better way to do it than within the confines of a rounded bottom pattern that, again, is still holding up fairly well. Again, we've been in here now for a bit. If you consider, if you consider the validity of this as the start of the rounded bottom, and we've been in this thing for a while, August, about 2 months already. And then, really what we want to see is just this move up to here. We want to set a higher high. So let's say that maybe we do actually string together some days of victory here, and we can crack through this trend line. Well, all of a sudden you are in fact talking something up into this range. Maybe one more move back down into here where the 21 simple might be waiting for us. So all of a sudden by mid-October, this thing's ready to roast maybe, right? And then by the time you get over here, let's say that we follow along the timeline at the bottom here, by the beginning of November, end of October, all of a sudden we might actually be talking about recovering up to the daily 200. Now, are we going to recover that immediately? Of course not. Of course not. Yeah, and we've seen this enough times. We've seen this play out plenty of times to know that that's probably an unlikely scenario. But don't be surprised if we come up and tap it whenever we do start to make some moves through here. But again, it probably won't be until closer to mid-October if that's going to happen, or late October. Just again, based on the pattern and the duration of time that's left within it potentially. But all in all, I mean, this is, I mean, really, I mean, other than the fact that, all of the indicators are not perfect right now, and they're certainly not going to be, because we're still kind of working our way out of the pits of despair. But if this is, if I click this over to the weekly chart, these lines will look a little more logical. This one is showing the divergence on the chart, as far as us setting lower lows on the price action but higher lows on the MACD histogram. This is that trend line, and then here we've got a break of the actual pattern of the signal line. Now, the fact that the signal line's way down here says we've still got a lot of work to do to get back into really bullish territory. It's not until you climb above here that things start to get really exciting. And this is a weekly chart, so things, especially on a weekly chart, once you get above there, you could see the excitement that comes in. I mean, here it was above the zero baseline. And once it got there and stayed above it, that's when we went into that massive bull run here. Again, you can see we would have some work to do to accomplish that. And as far down as we are here, there's really no basis for comparison except for this right here. So, kind of taking into account where this one was when where you see the price action versus the MACD signal line, this thing's got some work to do unless it just goes and just absolutely soars out of here, which, is feasible. But so far so good. I mean, that's really all we want to make sure we look at, is the fact that we've got some positive things going for us here. At least to an extent, right? Now, obviously, we know we can't solely rely upon the longer term time frames, just because of the fact that you only get so many signals in there. I mean, the reality is this thing could just get absolutely peppered here today, right? Like, we're at this trend line for overhead resistance. As far as this guy here on the RSI, we've been struggling to break through that line really ever since mid-August, late August. and then you've got this guy here that went above it just temporarily, but it's feasible this thing could just get rejected right back out of here, and then we roll back down and maybe have to come back down and even retest something down here. And maybe this is actually, we've talked about this before too, maybe this is actually the point where the price action wanted to show us, hey, yeah, this is your time, right? We're gonna make it this time, because it looks very organic at the moment. We kind of had this little fall off of this trend line. We're back on it. Now the assumption is, as we've talked about in the past, you should be able to come up and tap the top of the trend line. The only thing is we got this 50 moving average that's in our way, and we've not been above that recently, right? It's been several weeks since we've been above that. So, this thing could come in, act as some resistance, and then suddenly we are actually chasing ourselves back down here off of this trend line. That, if that ends up happening, then that's where I'm going to say, all right, if we come back down here one more time, say like this 18.5-ish range, but it holds there, that's where I'm going to look, assuming it doesn't happen now, right? Like I think there's still a chance that even in the next 48 hours, let's say, we end up making a move up here. But let's say that it doesn't. We just get an outright rejection here and it's nasty. And we actually maybe do pull back here, which let's just say it does fall out of this kind of little uptrend. Then maybe it even comes back and taps down all the way to like 18.1, and then that's where it's going to just absolutely fly back up this pattern. Now, if, let's say that it happens that way, maybe that same concept. We're talking maybe the next 10 days or so that process would play out. If we get rejected here, can't get above it, boom, we come back here. Looks like we're falling out of the rounded bottom. Bears are getting excited, and then all of a sudden, boom, they get blasted in the face when this thing absolutely erupts. Certainly a feasibility, and again, you can see where that's a logical scenario simply because this trend line here, horizontal support and resistance, clearly we've not been able to manage to get past there very much anytime recently, which again is fairly well represented by this particular trend line. Just kind of confirming the price action versus the RSI, and you can see where that takes place. Now, that all being stated, as I mentioned, let's zoom in on some shorter term time frames. Now, the 4 hour is kind of interesting. So we've made a lot of attempts here recent, and this is where I say that the price action kind of has a more organic feel to it, and maybe this might actually be a time we could see it make some moves and not just get outright rejected. We've now on the 4 hour we've actually recovered a few levels that we were struggling with before. One of them being right here at this 19.7-ish range. So we're up above that, and now we've got the 200, and we've basically got support of it. So really, what I'm looking for right now, and granted, I may end up being very disappointed here, but what I'm looking for at the moment is that at least ideally, and again, I'll always put that caveat in there that it's not a given what I'm saying here, but ideally this time we are going to hold the 200 simple this time on the 4 hour chart, not roll back off. Thus, potentially you're looking at something, no further down than a wick, maybe back down to here. And even then, ideally it doesn't lose this 19.8 level. Now the interesting thing about this little guy here, so we've got this larger rounded bottom pattern that we've already been monitoring, and it's tough to say exactly where this begins and ends. We could argue that maybe it actually deserves to come all the way up here to where this was. Maybe we could argue that it actually began over here and this was the start, the fall into it. Either way you look at it, our goal is ultimately to get this guy to exceed this high first. So we break this high, all of a sudden we should be up here. Once we break that high, ideally we come back down here, find support, and then make a next push all the way up to here. And again, this plays out one of a few different ways, but again, at the end of the day, these are the numbers we're really targeting over the next few weeks potentially. Would be as high as 21, maybe as high as, let's say 22.5-ish, and then potentially as high as, really recovering all the way back up to this level. And you can see where that could possibly play out. And again, I don't have any problem if it wants to come up here and then roll out of this. I already know what I expect will happen. That would be our final move. If it only comes up to here and then gets stopped out one more time and then falls through this round of bottom, I'm looking for the double bottom outside of this pattern. And again, maybe even as far down as here again, and then just absolutely roast its way out of there. But again, just because it's what I'm looking for doesn't mean that's what the market's going to give us. But it feels like that's a distinct feasibility, and that would be just what we want to see at this stage. And again, you zoom in on the shorter term time frames. Hourly, you could say that maybe just temporarily we lost the rounded bottom that we've been monitoring on the hourly chart. You kind of did that here. You got a nice little falling wedge as part of it, roasted right back up in. And again, right now you can see we are in fact making our push up the chart. Again, I figure here soon, 20,300, we're going to at least tap that. Do we take it out right now? Tough to say. But if we get up here, tap 20,300, then all of a sudden we look at potentially one more tap here before another nice push to the upside. So really, this thing could play out fairly quickly. The only concern would be, again, on the hourly, that it probably needs to cool off a little more than that. It really probably does. And this rounded bottom concept here, it's tough to really say for sure where that one is. Maybe if it's here, we've already back tested the break of this initial rounded bottom, which is fairly logical here. But yeah, we're making good progress. But again, this if we didn't get this little hourly double bottom, this thing's already probably coming off the rails. But let's compare this to, say, this over here. We don't have many more hours where we're going to be able to spend up here. So, or at least, you wouldn't assume that would be the case just based on the fact that this thing is way up here in overbought territory. It already started to try and make its way down, and then, found some footing there with a little double bottom. Now, the interesting thing about the moving averages here is that we don't have a cross of all of these yet. If there's enough bullish follow through, then what will end up happening is all of these moving averages will cross over the 200 and then just start flowing. The price action will just flow its way up the chart. Again, none of this is a given, but that's at least a feasibility there as well. But again, at least for right this moment, I just based on some smaller patterns and stuff, I do think that we could maybe get up there and tap 20,300 before we got to maybe reset and wait for a pattern to play out again here. But yeah, I mean, there's some good stuff involved here, some things that we like. And this 20,050 range, again, that's a fair, at least on this chart, it's a fairly major level. That identify, this chart I actually have identifying the absolute bottom so far. So this 236 is a big deal. You can see that we've been above it a few times and then capitulated back below it each time. But again, this price action just has a nicer feel to it. Now this is a rising wedge right here, at least in part, potentially this little guy here, and that's where I'm saying that this may come off the edge soon. But ideally, at this stage, we're holding 19.7-ish, 19.5-ish, and 19.5 would get us a higher low than here. So yeah, we, at least got some chances there. But again, I'd love to see this thing come back up, tap 20,300 here real soon. Look for a positive retest here at 20,000, and then boom, we're off and running to the next level up. Man, we start getting above that, and all of a sudden you say, all right, well, if this is its own rounded bottom pattern, right? Let's say that from here to here is its own rounded bottom within this larger one. Well, then let's go ahead and we can measure that out, and we've got a pretty good idea what our target would be. All right, let's come on up here. you break 20,300 and hold that, and all of a sudden you can start talking about something that actually gets pretty damn close to this high here and potentially breaks us out of that bigger downtrend. So again, how does it play out? I've given you a couple of different scenarios how it could, but I don't hate what I see at the moment. The only question would be, does it come up here and then, maybe actually, this is the cup. This would be, there's a concept called cup and handle. This would potentially be the cup. If you form a handle, a lot of times the handle will just be kind of a falling channel, and it will be this, sometimes it can be fairly tight, but maybe we bounce our way down to here and then come on up again. So again, a lot of different scenarios could play out. Which ones are going to be? Hey, your guess is as good as mine, but we're going to find out together before you know it. And then let's just go ahead and we'll wrap this up, get in on the shortest term time frames, and get everybody on their way for the day. All right, and then just getting down to the granular stuff here, we got the 15-minute. It keeps poking up here. It wants to push further, but I'm beginning to wonder if maybe this 20,150 is going to be at least maybe a little bit of a double top. Again, you can see this trend line here. This is actually, I put this on a 15-minute chart, but you can see that it's holding up very well on the hourly as well. It would suggest that there's the feasibility this thing could come up here one more time. Right now we're getting a little bit of bearish divergence just because this RSI high exceeds this one, but then these are equivalent highs on the price, and you can see it really didn't like coming on up here. It's a bearish divergence there, a little bit at least. But again, I do think that we probably do get to the top of this trend line here. I kind of put this one just kind of as a placeholder based on this lower section. And maybe it ends up looking more like this as opposed to, the trend line that I put on there. Again, I'm just speculating as of now based on what I'm looking at and what I think could happen. But the beauty is we're already putting in closes above where we closed this candle out. Now we just got to take out this high. So that's where I really think that we do find some way to make a push to get at least to near the top of this. And then maybe we do actually pull down one more time, test this out real good, and then off and running. If that ends up happening, and again, let's say we get that move, I think that at that point you look at it and you say, all right, well, where's our realistic target? Let's just do that. 1.618 takes us right up here, 21.3. So, these are, and again, it's just funny. I'm sure as I'm sitting here telling you all these numbers, I'm talking about these measured moves and all that stuff. Like you're sitting here thinking, whatever, blah, 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 measure this, measure that. But it's amazing when you take it and you apply different concepts to it. In this case, I'm looking at a Fibonacci analysis to see where, our potential target is. Well, the 1.618 extension from this move from here down to here, so this would be the 1 point and this would be the 0 point. The 1.618 matches almost identically to the 0.618 on the standard fib analysis. Actually, on this chart, this one's a reverse fib as well, but it matches up directly to this level based on the move from here to here. So then all of a sudden you figure, all right, you come up here, now where do I find support? Boom, 20,500 is where we want it. If not there, then no less than this right here. Then boom, we're ready for another round of upside. At least potentially, and there we have it. I mean, I don't want to take up any more time than that. Kind of covered the bases. Again, ideally at this point, 19.4 is going to hold up 100%. Ideally, we don't even get down below 19.6 here in the immediate term. Let's start making our way up the chart. Let's see if we can tag this 21.5. And again, if we come on back to this chart over here, the weekly chart, we got the 22.5 level right here. Again, I said I didn't necessarily think we'd recover that, but I thought that this level was feasible for right now. Boom, there you are. Confluence right there. All sorts of trend lines and everything that matches right up with it. Now, if we do get a move up here, and to be frank, again, I even said it earlier, there's a chance that we do see a wick that comes all the way up here. I just don't think that that one holds up right away, and it probably finds a way to sell itself off to close, potentially below here. If not, it probably closes below here, and then we're just looking for this level to hold up at that point for our go time. Hey, potential excitement out here. If nothing else, we got some positive movement. It seems very organic in terms of the way that the price action is moving, so I'm feeling reasonable about the way that it looks right now. And again, we've talked about this. The cross has taken place. Now the price action should start to move up towards it. Love to see this happen. If we can just go ahead and keep on pushing, nobody's going to say no to that. So let's see it, Bitcoin. Let's do this. Let's go. All right. We appreciate you guys. Looking forward to catching up tomorrow.